call the meeting into order. All right. I call to order the commission meeting for the City of Natchitoches Planning and Zoning Department. We have, my initial comments are this, the audio of this meeting, we have historical audio that is available at www.cityofnatchitoches.gov. I would state for the record that I've made a certification in my capacity as chairman of the City of Natchitoches Planning and Zoning Commission. I do hereby certify pursuant to Louisiana Revised Statute 24:1.1A2B that the matters before the City of Natchitoches Planning and Zoning Commission, if delayed, would cause curtailment of vital public services and severe economic dislocation and hardship if the meeting on this agenda was not conducted through authorized electronic means, signed by me yesterday. That is to allow our audio, visual stuff over the internet so that we have, I think we actually have a physical quorum today, but it allows for folks who are not here to participate both from the commissioner's standpoint and the constituency to participate in this meeting otherwise. I would ask that everyone present put their phones on silent or vibrate at this time. Then we will hear from people in opposition to the applicant, and then we will hear a rebuttal from a single person designated by the applicant to address the comments made in opposition to the application. Ms. Rock, did I miss anything? I guess our next meeting, I guess I need to say that our next city council meeting is August 24th, fourth Monday, and there are no applications for rezoning to be presented. So what we have tonight is waivers or subdivisions which are subject to 10-day appeals from people that are aggrieved. They must be filed with the city clerk within 10 days of tonight's decision. If you didn't sign in, please sign in. When you come to the AMBO, I'd appreciate it if you would identify yourself by name and address. And at that point, did I miss anything, Ms. Rock?
No, sir, you haven't.
Ms. Oaks, roll call.
Ron Brown.
Here.
Isaac Lewis.
Here.
Ricky McAllister.
Here.
Jacob Cooper.
Here.
Charles Whitehead III.
Here.
Jamie Flanagan.
Here.
Bobby Claiborne.
Here.
Michael Lewis.
All right, I see that we, that's a quorum, we have a physical quorum, is that correct, Ms. Oaks?
Yes, sir.
Do we have anybody appearing electronically?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, ma'am. We have the approval of our minutes. Did we provide those to the commissioners, Ms. Oaks?
Yes.
So we've got approved June 2 and July 7 meetings at this time?
Yes. We do.
All right. The minutes have been provided according to the Director to the Commissioners from June 2, 2020 and July 7, 2020. I'd entertain a motion to waive the formal reading of those minutes and adopt them as proposed.
I so move.
Motion by
Second.
Claiborne, second by McAllister. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Ms. Oaks, make sure that I sign those before I leave. Roman number 4, old business. It's subsection A, the application by Mr. Eddie and Ms. Emily Harrington for a variance at the following location, lot 27 of phase 2, St. Clair Estates, unit number 3, to extend a roof line to cover the patio. Berry municipal address of 603 St. Clair Avenue, exhibit number 1, councilperson district number 1 in your packet. Summary of the application by the director.
Well, according to Mr. Harrington, there was already a patio slab that was formed there, and they're wanting to cover that. The patio was actually in the setbacks when the house was designed, so they couldn't go back and do a variance on that. But because now they're wanting to cover it, we're requesting a variance of 13.3 feet so he can cover that patio on the back end.
Comments pursuant to your notices?
No, everyone that saw it approved.
All right, thank you, Ms. Rock. Mr. Harrington, you heard the summary of the application by you and your wife. Under this application, is there anything you need to add or correct?
There's not. It is just a covered patio. It is, it's open, it's not enclosed in any way. Just connected to the roof line, therefore, it is a technical extension of the roof line. It'll still be 12 feet rear setback and to the property line, and the neighbor it would be affecting did write a statement that he's in favor of it. In the list I received of all houses within 300 feet, I personally visited every single house, only 4 of which I wasn't able to speak to the homeowners, and everyone was A-okay with it.
All right, hang tight, Mr. Harrington. Is anyone to speak on behalf of the application of Harrington? Hearing none, is there anybody in opposition to the application of Harrington? Hearing none, Mr. Harrington, I'm not going to let you rebut yourself. So
Thank you.
We'll move on to discussion by commissioners.
Seems to me that it's really kind of a partial variance since the slab is already there, and it was the point, as I understand. So, you know, it, like I say, it's pretty much covering what was already there. So,
Any other comments by any other commissioners?
I make a motion to approve.
Motion by Claiborne, second by Brown. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. That's final in 11 days, Mr. Harrington. And so you'll just need to wait 11 days to make sure no appeal has been filed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Roman number 4, old business, subsection B, the application by Mr. Braddock L. Johnson to subdivide the following. Location 17 acres in section 50 and 56, Township 9 North, Range 7 West, Natchitoches Parish, Louisiana, bounded on the north by Stevens, east by Bertrand Jones, south by the continuation of Park Street for the purposes of a lot of sale, lot on Catlin Circle. It's actually a lot on Catlin Circle and Culberson Lane, correct?
Yes, it is.
Exhibit number 3 in Councilperson's District, Councilperson District number 1, Exhibit 3 in our packets. If Mr. Braddock Johnson or his designee will come forward while the director summarizes the application.
In 2017, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Braddock submitted an application for a subdivision development to the Planning Commission and for the surrounding residents of that area. That application was not, it didn't go forward. So Mr. Braddock's is what he's doing this time, is actually submitting a subdivision, but it's only of 3 parcels that he's cutting out for that 17 acres. He's not doing a total subdivision, which most of the residents or they think that it's a continuous subdivision development, but it's not. He's actually only cutting out 3 parcels of land. One lot facing on Catlin and the other facing on Culberson Lane. He's subdividing those lots for the purpose of sale.
And just full disclosure, I received a couple of phone calls from folks, mostly concerned with Lot 2 in your preliminary subdivision plat about Catlin Circle. I directed those folks to show up or appear electronically. It seemed to me their concern was that on Catlin Circle, there's a ditch on the south side of Catlin Circle that would have to be filled in with a culvert that would require, of course, it would require a compliance with our zero impact drain water ordinance. I don't know the name of it at this point in time. But what we have is lots 3 and 2, which are about 1 acre and some change, and would leave lot 1 at 16.0 acres. Is that your take on it, Madam Director?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Johnson, you heard my summary as well as the director's. Is there anything you need to add to that or correct?
No, I don't think so. Sounds right to me.
All right, and course, you realize you start nibbling on this thing 2 or 3 more times and we'll have to look at your plan. But this initial thing, this initial, application, I think, is compliant. Do you agree, Madam Director?
I do.
All right. Is there anyone else to speak on the, application of Mr. Johnson?
I do have several letters that were sent in, or emails that were sent in.
Why don't you, in these COVID times, we have to take them in. So please tell us the name of the commentator and and their comments.
Okay. The first is Mr. Lionel Dawson Sr. of 223 Ledette Drive. He said that his concern is drainage problems that would be created with the sale and any structures built on their property. I have experienced high water problems on Ledette Drive where driving was impossible until existing drainage could take off the runoff. What plans, if any, can be addressed or solve drainage problems by that sale?
Excuse me, I thought this was speaking for, not against. Am I missing that?
We moved on. No one spoke forward.
Okay,
Okay,
sorry.
well,
No
my
one
bad,
spoke
I'm sorry.
forward, Mr. Johnson, so we're hearing
Well, I didn't hear
comment.
you pronounce to go on.
No,
Or
and
against.
actually, what I should have done before I took you was take electronic comments.
Okay.
I apologize. Go ahead. We'll
Okay.
take any electronic comments regardless of whether they're for or against.
Okay. Well, just to be, there was no electronic comments that was for the application.
All right?
Everything that
So-
was submitted so far has been against.
And so there was, let's make sure, there was no one else to speak on behalf of the Johnson application. So let's hear the electronic comments against. We'll go to the physical comments. Mr. Johnson, please keep note of it because your rebuttal will be limited only to their comments. Do we understand each other, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, our next,
Continue.
Ms. Carolyn Britton. Let's see, she did not give her address for that. She is objecting to the Braddock Johnson Planning and Zoning application. She was also inquiring about drainage and issues of that nature. Our next person that we have is Mr. Steve Taylor. His comments would, I'd like to comment on the application by Braddock Johnson to subdivide his 17 acres. I do not have a problem with him selling the 2 lots shown on his survey if he can guarantee that doing so will not cause further issues with the drainage in the area. We already have drainage issues in periods of heavy rain, as the Planning and Zoning Commission and the city already know. I know that building a house on Lot 2, if that access will be from Caitlin Circle, will require a culvert or a bridge to be installed to cross the drainage ditch that drains some water from Lede to Caitlin Drives. As long as what is installed to cross the drainage ditch is adequate, I'm okay with it. I also know that consultants can be found to testify to whatever agenda that you want to promote, so take such information and present it with this in mind. I believe in personal property rights as long as what is done with their property does not adversely affect adjacent landowners. The last one that I have is Mr. Rick Harrington. He says, I'm sorry that I cannot be at this meeting. I don't think he's here. He says, I live at 226 Ledette Drive. I am immediately behind the house. On my side of the street is Mr. Johnson's land, separated from us by the city's drainage ditch. I am sure that when Mr. Johnson purchased his property, he did not know that it's subject to flooding in times of extreme rainfall and that the drainage in our neighborhood is terrible. I sure didn't know how bad it was when I built my home. I'm sorry for both of us, but we must not do anything to make the situation worse. In 2016, most of the 17-acre tract was underwater, the drainage ditch as well as out of its banks, and it was all flowing into the backyards of Ledette Drive residents. Water went into 3 homes on Ledette and the garage of the 4th home. The water also rose along the street, became the drainage ditch because the drainage ditch backed up the drain at the corner of Ledette and Caitlin. It came into my front yard and was within inches of coming up on my front porch. My porch is 22 inches high. A problem is that the city ditch flows into the Cane River Drainage District ditch at the south end of Caitlin, and that ditch does not carry water well. Therefore, it does not take the water from the city ditch very well, and it backs up pretty fast into our neighborhood. It is critical that the flow of water in the city's drainage ditch not be obstructed or constricted and make things worse. We who live alone today in Clayton are very aware of this. I keep sandbags in my garage to help protect me against the flooding that would eventually come again. And so whenever anything happens in our neighborhood that might affect the flow of water out of it, we become concerned. That is why we opposed Mr. Johnson's proposal subdivision 3 years ago. Not because we oppose Mr. Johnson developing his property, but because we oppose the increased risk of flooding of our property. Mr. Johnson's plans did not show a right-of-way to Culbertson Lane for the Track 2. Therefore, I have to assume that he or a purchaser intend to cross the city drainage ditch to Caitlin. This is a massive ditch. It will require an enormous culvert or bridge. We don't want anything in that ditch that would slow the flow of water out of our neighborhood. It would also require the connection to underground utilities, including water and sewage. How can they cross the ditch without impeding the flow of water? And if Mr. Johnson's plan is to sell more lots along Caitlin, it will multiply the problem. The City Council passed an ordinance this year that requires a new subdivision to have a neutral impact on drainage. The new ordinance requires Mr. Johnson to present a drainage plan. Louisiana law requires that a person not do anything on their property that would damage their neighbor's property. As a resident of Lede Drive, I just want to be protected from anything making our drainage and flooding situation worse. That's the end of emails, but we had several call-ins from at least 10 other residents.
All right, did they make any comment worth noting?
No, they were all against the subdivision.
Ms. Oaks, just duplicate Judge Harrington's email to Ms. Rock in our minutes, if you don't mind. All right, any opposition to the application of Braddock Johnson in person?
Rebuttal?
No, you get to the end.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah,
Mr.
Mr.
Johnson, if you would have a seat just against the wall over there, we'll get to your up here, whatever you'd like. Who would like to come speak?
How y'all doing this afternoon?
Please identify yourself, sir, and tell us where you live.
I'm Elvin Shields. I live on 102 Caitlin, Natchitoches, just across the street, across the ditch from the new Lot 2 on this plan. Okay. Since we went through this back in June 2017, and we had to go all the way to the city council and got a unanimous no on this development. I understand Mr. Braddock Johnson wants to develop 2 lots at this time, which seemed innocent enough. The last time he went to develop this, he started out with, I think, 4 lots. Then it went to 40 lots. Then it came back to, it went to 50 lots. Then it came back to 40 lots before we had to stop the whole thing. To me, it looks like the exact same plan, but looks like we're gonna do it onesies and twosies. Regardless of how it's done, it's gonna affect me and my neighbors on Caitlin and the Day and over on some of the other streets. Now, as I said back then, and I'm saying now, I have no objection to Mr. Johnson developing his property, but if you lived there in 2016, it was in a lot, that same water was in a lot of everybody's living rooms, and nobody could leave the subdivision. It was a flood. We had the kids riding up and down Caitlin in kayaks. That's how bad it was. Okay. Since then, it's worse. This is what's living in that drainage ditch today. Wasn't living in that then. The ditch was cleared. This is what's living in there now. Once
Let the record reflect that the testimonial is holding up a cattail.
Well, anybody want a cattail, they can have it. But this is what's living in the drainage. Nothing to do with Mr. Johnson, it's to do with the city of Natchitoches. They don't clean that ditch. And it is worse than it's ever been. And to make it worse, we've added Hobby Lobby, who's dumping their water off the lot they developed into the same ditch, less than a quarter mile from my house. So now that ditch is gonna back up when Hobby Lobby start dumping theirs in. The water leaving St. Clair, it's got nowhere to go because Hobby Lobby is gonna dump theirs. And now Mr. Johnson wants to start a development, and that's gonna create more problems. As I said, and I've always said, the development of that property, maybe one day when I'm dead, it'll get developed. But right now, we have lost 5 people who was protesting this 3 years ago to death. My sister and my brother-in-law, they passed. They own property on coast. See, long as this goes, we get older and this thing keep coming up. So now we're looking at just 2 lots. Next year we'll be back down here talking about 2 more lots. Because 2 lots out of 17 lots is just not economically feasible to develop. I don't know what his mind of developing, but I'm totally against it until the city can say, we're gonna do something about the drainage. We, the city of Natchitoches, we need to do something about our drainage before we start this wildlife development and all the property in East Natchitoches. There's a lot of property on East Natchitoches people want to develop, but the drainage is not gonna allow it. So that's something the city needs to take care to do that. So I'm against it until the city, the parish, drainage board get together and say, how are we gonna help the people in East Natchitoches before we start doing a bunch of development, okay? No problem about, I have against development, it's just that it's gonna flood me out. And every time it rains, I got 3 pumps working in my backyard, pumping water out. You see? So it's bad out there already, and that came from the original developer. And we continue to develop in these flooded areas. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions for this gentleman, for commissioners?
You mentioned that ditch being behind Hobby Lobby. Is that behind that tree line that's behind the store, where the store is going to be there, or exactly in relation to Hobby Lobby is that ditch?
I can throw a rock from my backyard to the new Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
The noise from the construction, the burning of the big trees is killing us. But that's not the problem. The problem's gonna be when Hobby Lobby load up all that with concrete, and that's going right into our same ditch. That's the same ditch. Same ditch. So somehow the Hobby Lobby slipped by. I was sleeping that day or something. Should have been down here to protest.
Yeah, in reference to that question, I do have I am showing, is where Sandra and James and Paula Sandiford, that lot line does go all the way back to that back road, does it not? Is that the Hobby Lobby property that we're talking
No,
about?
no, the next.
Or there's some extra?
The next property, after Sandifer and, is Mersimco, and then in front of Mersimco is H&L Natchitoches, or I don't know, whatever the name of it is. But you've got Sandifer, and then
Hobby Lobby?
then Mersimco in the back.
Then Hobby
and
Lobby.
Hobby Lobby in the front.
Okay. So there is, so this is, our map's just not updated, it's got.
No, well, no, it's just not big enough,
Yeah, okay,
because
okay,
it wasn't relevant, I guess.
okay.
I've got one question for you, sir. You said 2 lots out of 17. I didn't understand that comment.
No, I mean, on 17 acres.
2 lots out of 17
Yeah,
acres.
2 lots out of 17 acres.
Okay, all
To
right,
me,
well,
it's not
I understand.
economically feasible.
I understand, I
I
understand.
don't wanna be coming down here every year until I'm dead,
Well,
cause I'll
The-
come back.
this gentleman has a right to file an application, and you have a right to show up. I just want to make sure that the record's complete, because I didn't understand 2 out of 17 made no
Yeah.
sense to me. But 2 out of 17 acres makes perfect sense. So thank you, sir.
Anybody want cattails?
I've got some in my drainage ditch.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions for him? Anyone else in opposition to the application of Braddock Johnson? Mr. Williams, please identify yourself and where you live for the record.
It's Joe Payne Williams Sr. I live at 200 Lede, Natchitoches, and I'm here for myself, but also for St. Clair Estate Unit 6 Homeowners Association, which includes Mr. Shields and all of the people on Caitlin and several people on Lede. The plan that is put forth does not include any information whatsoever about drainage. The ordinance that the chairman referred to earlier, I believe was passed in March of 2020, and it's 023 of 2020, and specifically section 28.1-195, that's entitled Maintenance of Drainage Facilities. And it requires that nothing be done that's going to affect the drainage system that is already in force and in effect. And this plan shows nothing as to how it's going to accomplish the use of Lot 2 that is right there on the Caitlin Street ditch that eventually gets into Bayou Cadnat. The flooding that was there, as Judge Harrington made reference to in the email that was read, is still the same threat that we have today. They've done nothing that has eliminated that threat of flooding. As Mr. Shields says, that ditch is completely grown up. There's been nothing done to it, at least this year, for sure. I believe that this ordinance requires that a plan that is going to affect the drainage have in its plan an address of the drainage system that they're going to be interfering with, and this plan has nothing. Also, as Mr. Shields and as Judge Harrington said, I don't object to people developing their property. But the aggravation of a problem which is there, that we know is there, that was not properly addressed when that subdivision and that unit was built, is only going to get worse. And to sit by and let it get worse because others got away with building it improperly is not what I believe is in my best interest and or the interest of the Homeowners Association that I'm an officer of and represent here. And so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Are there questions or comments from the commission members of the Natchitoches Plan?
In relation, I'm sorry, someone,
No, I said I had something to.
in relation to what Mr. Williams has said, I have a question for Mr. Braddock. And that is, sir, do you plan on constructing a house on that property and then selling the home and property, or just to sell the lots as they are?
Plans to sell a lot to
And for the record, in case it didn't get picked up, Mr. Johnson indicated himself a friend of the family that wants to build a house there. Is that correct, sir? All right.
But,
Indicated-
Charlie, I have a question as an attorney. I know you'll be able to answer. Is it the responsibility or the buyer or the seller to make sure that the drainage there is not impeded by anything pertaining to that property?
Well, we've got a couple other lawyers here, but I will tell you, it's everybody. Wait a second, Mr. Williams, you're not released. I hate to pull your daddy out on you, but I didn't dismiss you yet, sir. It's on everybody. And so the question, I think, which I'm about to ask Mr. Williams, is does he have a problem with the actual subdivision, which is an administrative function of this legislative board, or does he have a problem with the enforcement of the planning and zoning regulations in developing property? Because, you know, we're only a legislative body to say, does this meet the requirements?
Right.
And then, unfortunately, I don't mean to throw Chantel
I was gonna comment on that.
Chantel and our inspector on there, but just because we approve something, if there's 100 gallons an hour flowing this way right now, when Mr. Johnson purchaser puts their house on there, if it's still 100 gallons an hour flowing that way or that way, whichever way you want to look at it, and I'm going left and right, as long as they can comply with the engineering requirement that the flow is not altered, then that's an enforcement issue. From our perspective, and I don't really know, I've looked at that ordinance and I don't think it requires pre-approval of the engineering that says it'll comply. I think it ultimately envisions that if it's approved and the structure is constructed, somebody has to certify that if 100 gallons per hour is what's flowing there, it's now flowing there.
Okay, that brings up another question I have. Who will be the person or persons who will decide whether or not it complies?
Well, technically, it's Chantrell and our city inspector. If they had to defer to the city engineer, because of course our city inspector is an architect, so we've got somebody a little higher up than regular city inspectors, but I would hope he would rely on the engineer that the city is contracted with to look at it and approve it.
But that's not required.
Oh, it is required. Well, it's required that he certifies, that Johnson's Vendee certifies that it complies. And it's up to us to look at it and either accept it at face value or look at it ourselves. Am I correct, Ms. Robb?
Right, I was just gonna say that, remember that this application is just for subdivision only.
Right.
Once it's approved, or if it's approved, then yes, Mr. Braddock would have to submit plans to show what he presents
Or
for.
whoever he sells to will have to say that it has a zero impact.
Correct. He has to show that. He has to show what he plans to do for drainage, for sewage, for anything he does before he builds has to be approved before Public Works, from the utility departments, from planning and zoning aspect. There's a whole lot of things that have to go first before they can actually build on that property.
And when you say planning and zoning, you don't mean us.
No.
You mean the administrative side
Right.
between you and Ms. Oaks and our inspector.
Correct. This is our planning commission that we present to for items such as a subdivision before it actually goes to the next step of actually building a property.
And of course, the public would have the right to inquire on the public records.
Correct.
All about anything that's been submitted with regard to that.
Correct.
All right, Mr. Williams, I don't think I had anything more for you. I just wanted to dig at you a little bit.
Well, we don't get to come back to anybody to express our objections to what is going to happen if this gets approved. Because we don't get a notice of a meeting such as this for all of those meetings that go into deciding what's going to be put in that ditch. We know that there's going to be something put in that ditch that's going to affect the drainage. And it's going to continue the next time with the next lot, or the next lot, and all the way down Culbertson. That is what the reality is, and we don't have a say other than we request a say at this meeting.
And I would just suggest to you that the price of democracy is being ever vigilant. Is anyone else here to speak against the application of Mr. Braddock Johnson?
Good evening. My name is Breland Johnson. I live on 729 Culbertson Lane. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today and speak on this particular issue that's before us. Just a quick history, and for the most part, I think everybody's somewhat aware of. January the 3rd of 2017, we've received the first application to rezone this property that's in question today from R1 to R2 to build duplexes. April the 4th, 2017, reason for the meeting was application to subdivide 17 acres to develop a multi-phase, single-family residential dwelling. Also, this was when we first heard the appearance of a pond to catch the water so that there wouldn't be any flooding. May the 2nd, 2017, reason for the meeting. Return to discuss application further, options of a loop road and the other, a single cul-de-sac. What I'm trying to add up to and what I'm trying to say is that there have been several different proposals to somewhat skirt around the fact of we have a common problem. The main problem we have is a drainage issue. The water is not able to drain for whatever reason. Mr. Shields somewhat dramatic with the cattails, and we can appreciate that, but that's not all of the problems. He did mention about Hobby Lobbies in there, and every drop of water that you add to our drainage situation only makes it worse. If the city was able to clean out that portion of the ditch, we still have a drainage problem because of my understanding. I understand that the ditch itself is not graded properly for proper drainage. That creates a problem. We were having a drainage issue 3 years ago. That hasn't changed. We're about to put concrete on the ground. And everywhere you put concrete, water is not absorbed into the ground. I'm not an engineer, that's just a common sense thing for me. Mr. Braddock proposes to have the property across on Culbertson Lane, and it's directly across. If a building is built on that lot, they can back out of their driveway onto my driveway. I know we still share an issue, a problem with the drainage on the Culbertson Lane side. We've had some street modifications. They've come.
Excuse me, sir. I'd like to interrupt you just for a second because I don't, maybe my map is incorrect, but it looks like the lot 3 that Mr. Johnson has appears to be about 400 feet from your house.
Okay. What I looked at on what, I had some information. Let's see.
I'm just trying to get an orientation.
Yeah. I must have left
If
that.
you don't mind, let me put on my mask. Let me show the exhibits that were provided to us.
Okay.
And I want everybody to understand, my job here is not to vote one way or the other, be in favor of somebody or another, but to make sure that folks here that serve have all the information that is appropriate for them to make the decision. So if I appear to antagonize somebody, it's not to antagonize them, it's to get the facts out. So here's what we were provided right here. This is the Culbertson lot, which appears to be right here. What we provided, the assessment appears to be, your house is about right here. Is that correct?
It's across from Bruce. It's across from Bruce.
Subdivision plat, by the draft, is non-standard. It is oriented east and west rather than north. And so that's my fault, because I assumed that he would have provided a survey according with the C standards of the survey. I've never seen, I'm telling you, I've done title work since I was in law school, but I've never seen a plat that was oriented east and west rather than north and south. I'm sorry, you're exactly correct. This gentleman's property is directly across from the property that is lot 3.
Yes, sir. Okay, now I just.
I'm sorry, continue. I
Okay.
interrupted you.
In saying that, I'm looking to see that, okay, there's a piece of property, and for whatever reason, you know, I would assume, and I don't know, I'm assuming that, you know, it's not much that needs to be done to develop that piece of property to put a house or a duplex. I'm not really sure what he wants to put there. But once again, you're putting concrete on the ground. Culbertson Lane has an issue with flooding further past my house. My house is sort of sitting on a little high note, but the problem is, it's still my community that I live in. It's gonna be an issue. When we really have heavy, heavy rains, our street actually can go underwater. And we're driving through the water, you know. Right now, I got pretty good vision. I can't tell you that 5 years from now. But we have that issue there. For us to, once again, and go down the same road, and you're absolutely right, Mr. Whitehead, it's his right to file. If he wants to file every 6 months, it's definitely his right. We also agree with the fact he's purchased 17 acres of property that is his. And, you know, that's great. But the problem is, we don't want to make anything that's gonna make it worse for the community. Not only Culbertson Lane side, but my neighbors to the north. We don't want this to accumulate water, to create more of an issue. You know, it's only one house on one side, another house on another side, but a year from now, we're back here again. We're discussing the same thing. If somebody has a plan to get the drainage ditch fixed, you know, several $1 million, I don't know what it would cost or what the expenditure would be to take care of this issue. But until we get that done, we're sort of spinning our wheels, because we're looking to build houses where it's really gonna just create a problem. That's our concern. You know, our street is fairly narrow. It's a lane, and I've discussed that each time I've stood up here. It's a fairly small street. It's been redone. It's a nice street now, but it's still narrow in width. We're looking at traffic that's gonna come up. All these things can be addressed, but our biggest problem is we don't have adequate drainage to support anything right now. And that's what we want to talk about. I've talked to a number of my neighbors up and down the street. Unfortunately, most because of coronavirus, were not able to attend. But they felt the same way that we do. We just see that it's an issue, and we hope that the city council, once again, looks at this very carefully, because it affects everybody.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions for this gentleman from members of the commission? All right, sir, I once again want to apologize to you. I just never envisioned that the north would be going left and right rather than up and down.
I looked at it a few times.
Thank you, sir.
No
We
problem.
appreciate you showing up. Ms. Rock, I would like to put on the record that Judge Eric R. Harrington is present. I showed him his notes that you read into the record. I offered him an opportunity to come forward and speak. He said there was nothing he would add or delete to this. And so just please make a notation of that in the record, and that Judge Harrington is present.
Will do.
And I assume that you're virus-free, Judge, so congratulations on that. Anyone else want to speak in opposition to the Braddock-Johnson application? Hearing none, Mr. Johnson, if you would come back and briefly rebut the criticisms or oppositions to your application, please, sir.
For rebuttal, all I gotta say is, I live on the day as well. I've lived there through the last flooding as well. The last time this issue came up, it was a misunderstanding on my part of what the term subdivision meant. So the subdivision plan that was put in last time, excuse me, was a mistake on my part.
Hold on a second, Mr. Johnson. I just realized I made a note that I needed correction from the director with. The previous gentleman said he didn't know whether it was going to be a duplex or a single-family residence. As I understand this, this is all zoned R1. So
Correct.
subdivisions of lot 1, 3, and 2 will retain their R1 subdivision status, which means that only a single-family dwelling can be built there. Is that correct, Ms.
That's correct.
Rock?
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Most of the rest of the issues that were brought up are all things that can be engineered out, as with, was brought up already, Hobby Lobby. I'm sure that Hobby Lobby was established a building under the same codes that are present now. And it seems to be that they were approved to build something that's gonna displace probably 15 or 20 times the amount of water that a complete subdivision would. So they were allowed to build because of engineering. And this is just the first step to get to the next step to figure that out. So it's not a spot to jump to a conclusion to say that I'm not worried about water or worried about displacement of water. I live on the same street. If issues were available and somebody wanted to be at the meeting that didn't get announcements, I'm welcome to a door knock and any conversation that's available. But I've had none. I've had no discussions with anybody. The one that happened 3 years ago, a discussion turned out bad between me and a neighbor. So I have personally not went and speak with anyone. She was upset and took it the wrong way. So that's why I haven't went and told anyone myself. So all these issues that's brought up are issues that can be dealt with in the next step of the process. This is the first step of a process, is it. Other than that, I'm not sure what else to say. Any engineering can be done. Any ditches that need to be done should be done by the city. The issue with the Culbertson Lane ditch is I cleaned my property. There is an underground ditch in there. It's not maintained by the city. Not even a little bit. It's collapsed in on top of itself. That's not an issue for me. That would be an issue had I be going to develop it further, and I'm willing to work with the city on it. I've worked with the city in the past on cleaning the ditches. I've let them bring equipment across multiple times, and only recently I've not let them do it. Is maybe why they hadn't cleaned the ditch, because they kept coming upon my property without letting me know, and it's trespassing. So I've ultimately stopped it. You see, they've not taken trespass on my property. They've just decided to stop, which I don't understand. So the issue's not me doing anything. It's your issue seems to be with the city. But, you know, that's just a personal viewpoint. I don't know. And that's all I got. All these issues can be engineered out. I'm willing to work with the city, obviously. I'm willing to work with anyone on any issue available, you know. So, that's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Is there questions for Mr. Johnson from the members of the?
I had one.
Yeah.
Do you plan on crossing the ditch to Caitlin for lot 2?
The person I'm selling the house with wanted to tie in specifically to Caitlin.
Okay.
How she plans on doing that, I'm not sure. I'm sure a bridge that goes over Red River doesn't affect any of the water in Red River.
Sure.
So again, engineering can be done and prevent any kind of issue. If it's expensive, you know, I've done discussed it with her, it's on her.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to work with her. I'm willing to help her and take any kind of corrective actions for that. But there are always other options to proceed than just not doing anything.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Ms. Robin, did that have anything to do with our application?
It did, and we read her notices into the
Okay.
minutes already.
All right. Just to make sure I understand the application, because I do, Mr. Johnson's lot on Caitlin fronts on Caitlin Drive.
Yes.
Now, he may have to, he or his successor in title may have to build something to physically access it, but there appears to be legal access to Caitlin Drive, is that correct?
Correct.
Does that bring up any questions for any commissioners?
Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Discussion by commissioners.
I do, okay, I have a couple of points, I guess. I totally understand the drainage issues, and I've seen them in that, on the day there. But our job, like Mr. Whitehead pointed out, and I understand the nibbling effect and I understand the subdivision effect, but the way I'm looking at this as a commissioner is that technically this is only 2 lots being divided, because technically if he wants to, and I think we brought it up before, he can go out here and not do lot 2 or lot 3, he can just leave it at lot 1, go build a great big house in the middle and attach to Caitlin if he wants to. Am I not correct?
Yes.
Or a small house.
Or he can do whatever he wishes to do. He can put 1 house on there, so it'd be 1 lot. So I mean, as far as accessing, and totally, believe me, I agree with you. 1 more ounce of water on that will just go over your roofs, I understand that. Also the Hobby Lobby thing, it's gonna be real interesting, but it's supposed to be engineered, so, but that will provide more. I totally understand that, and I'm in agreement with you. However, as far as us, we're just saying he has the right to divide these into two different deals, and our job is just that. So in my view of this, he's asking for 2 subdivisions, and he can cross Caitlin anytime he wanted to anyway, and put something across there and build something over here, and not ask for these 2 subdivisions. And as Breland knows, and I've come and visited with Breland, and I know the size of the road, the drainage, the whole 9 yards. And so that's how I'm looking at it as a subdivision, where our job is just to say, can he divide it or can he divide it? So really, I'm only looking at that in that situation. Just as a reference, and to go back, I built back in the back of Chinky Pen, and Miss Juanita was here, and I came to see her, and they told me, I asked her what we had to do. I had to build a road and had to put in a culvert, because actually they brought the drainage to my property on Chinky Pen back there, believe it or not, I don't understand how, all the way from Caitlin. And they told me I had to put in a 62-inch culvert across the road I was gonna build, which I can stand, I mean, it's huge. And
It's
so,
good lawyering, Ricky.
back to that point, I said, let's go down to the drainage ditch. I'll just put one across there and drain the whole street of Kaiser, and you didn't make somebody put in one that big. So I ended up with a 48-inch culvert, I think. And I wanted to go in the concrete culvert business after I paid for that thing too. But, so I mean, that's what I was forced to put in my ditch. And into Mr. Johnson's reference, and this is my understanding, I don't know, and this jumps a little bit, I'm just trying to lay out a basis here, is that I have 2, on my property, I have 60 acres, and on my property, the city, and I was informed that they have the right to come across my property to keep these drainage ditches cut, and they do. They come and they cut these drainage ditches on, I have 2, one in the front of my property that's real deep, and the one in the back that's real deep. And they come and it goes over to Martin Drive, and they cut from Martin Drive over, and they come through there. As far as, they're welcome at any, I was understanding they have the right to come and do that drainage ditch. And the levee board has the drainage ditch here to drain out the whole neighborhood, which is, like those cattails you got, I can bring you plenty of those. They're in front of my house in that drainage ditch, and they're in the front on the side. So if I get a big rain, it backs up into my yard, even in that. All that being said is that, the way I look at it, and I totally agree with your drainage issues, and unfortunately, I think it falls back on the city. But when I went to request to put it in, I put it in her hands and said, what do y'all require me to do? And they said, we do the engineering, and before I could build my house or do anything, that's what they give me, and that's what I had to put in, and that's what I abided by. Now, our street floods too. We get a hard rain, you can't get it. I slept in the front of my neighborhood for 45 minutes to let the water recede to get around the corner by Cedric and his house to get down there, because the water coming off the front of those 2-story buildings up front that overloads our neighborhood. And I do not affect the drainage onto Martin Drive. But all this being said is the same principle as you. And to go back to I just give you some background as far as procedures. They're gonna, if this gets approved, before he can build or anybody can build, they can go across Caitlin, regardless whether it's lot 2 and 3, or just lot 1. And so, you know, that was just my take on that. Hope it made sense, but I just tried to give a ballpark there. And I definitely know about your flooding issues. It's horrible, and I totally agree. 1 cup of water in that ditch, you know, like you said, the kayaks are going up and down the street, it'll be going into your living room. It can't take any more water. But as it sits right now, if he decided not to divide anything, he can go build a house and build a double-lane bridge, or he can put in a culvert, whatever the city engineer says it has to be a 48-inch culvert in that ditch, and he can do it right now. He don't have to have approval. Am I not correct? He wouldn't even have to come here. He can start building and get approval.
Well,
to
you'd
do
have
that.
to,
You
you'd
have
have
to get drainage.
he wouldn't have to get approval of us.
Right,
as
but
a
he'd have to go get
legislative body,
an engineer for the water.
But in the
Okay.
executive side with Ms. Rock and. our
Yeah, I was
city
just trying to give a background of where we're gonna come from when we try to make this decision on whether he can divide this into these 2 lots or 3 lots. That's all.
All right, Mr. McAllister, anyone else want to make a discussion or a statement? What is the commission's pleasure? If the commission has no pleasure, go ahead, Mr.
I make a motion to approve.
Motion by
on-
McAllister to approve. Do I have a
Second.
second?
Second.
Second by Cooper. Let's do a roll call vote. Ms. Oaks?
Isaac Lewis,
No.
no?
No.
Ron Brown,
No.
Ricky McAllister,
Yes.
Jacob Cooper,
Yes.
Jamie Flanagan,
Yes.
Bobby Claiborne,
No.
All right, well, I'm stuck in a spot that I hadn't been in quite a while. 3-3. I vote to approve, to carry it 4-3. All right?
So be it.
And I would encourage the opponents to it to keep in contact with the Director of Planning and Zoning to make sure that all engineering requirements under the executive side of the planning and zoning stuff is complied with. And Ms. Oaks and Ms. Rock, I'm sure, and our inspector will be happy to, our Inspector Kendall will be happy to share anything with you because it's all public record. Thank you. New business subsection A, nothing I'd like to insert in here. I think we have some guests tonight that I've encouraged to come. Miss Betty Smith couldn't come. She had to be somewhere else. I think Mayor-elect Williams is here. Would you just come and say something for us real quick, Mayor? I just wanted to make sure that you were here since you came from a place that never had to fool with this before. I'd like you to come see some of how the sausage is made.
Good evening, everybody. Certainly, I thank you, Mr. Whitehead, for the invite. Very interested in meeting here tonight. And I just, it's been a long road, long election, unusual because of the pandemic and everything. But I really look forward to working with you all concerning planning and zoning in the future. I'm excited, and I'm going to work as hard as I can in this role.
Well, let me tell you, Mayor-elect, this is what my daddy called pick and shovel work. That's what we're doing here.
Right.
It's listening to people, and it's not a pleasant thing always. Sometimes it's really pleasant.
Right.
But you have to weigh things, and the great thing about it is you and the city council get to look at anything we do, so it goes back to you.
Right.
And I really appreciate you coming. I'd really appreciate if you come on September 1 to give you at least 2 experiences of our stuff. Of course, you're always welcome, but we'd like you to at least see how we do things.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All
I
right,
appreciate
thank you.
it.
Yes, sir.
Did Miss Rosemary Washington or Eli, did she make it? I can't tell with the mask. Miss Washington, Miss Eli, would you come up? She's our representative-elect from District 4.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Rosemary Washington. It was very nice being brought to Mr. Whitehead. Thank you very much. And great to have me on the team. Thank you.
Well, and I extend our invitation to you to come on September the 1st, which is our next regular meeting. We had an issue earlier this month about doing this stuff electronically. The city attorneys worked with us and we got it squared away. There was a new act passed by Governor Edwards. I had to read that thing, I don't know if you were in here, about sort of the emergent nature, so we could make sure that we did it electronically and people could appear electronically. That's an act now, so we'll have a blended meeting from now on, I think.
Yes, sir.
But I appreciate you coming, and I encourage you to come to at least one more meeting, please, ma'am.
I agree. Thank you.
No problem, thank you. I left a message from Mr. Christopher Petit. I don't know if Councilman Petit showed up.
He's here.
Councilman-elect, would you come forward? I thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, I just thanks for the invite, and it was very interesting to kind of take in, you know, what goes on, and I just look forward to sitting in more meetings.
And just remember, you can always overrule us. Three of y'all get together, you can overrule us. That's, we all try to listen to everybody, weigh their concerns. And, you know, one of the problems is a lot of folks come in, they're not familiar with the statutes or the ordinances, and they confuse a lot of what we do, Councilman-elect, at this legislative level with what Chantrell and Nicole and Kendall do on the enforcement side. And so sometimes it's all about planning and zoning, and they confuse this sort of legislative board with the executive branch that the mayor-elect and you all have control over about enforcement. And so, you know, we don't require people to have law degrees here, but we do try to respect and point out what we have to look at. I think Mr. McAllister did a good job of it, of what we have to look at. And I think in one of that application that just passed 4-3, I think what Commissioner McAllister basically said is you need to look at enforcement. You need to hold our feet to the fire on the executive side and make sure administratively we do what we need to do. But I really appreciate you showing, and we hope to see you next month. Thank you, sir. Roman numeral 6, report of office activities. Ms. Rock, do you have anything?
The only new thing that I can say we have right now is that instead of us having to get an outside broadcaster, Mr. Steve has set up to where we have our own in-house broadcasting to be able to go to live stream. Our Facebook page is www.natchitochesla.gov. So.
Well, I'll talk with Steve about it, and maybe we'll talk with the mayor-elect, and if we need to do Zoom, it might be a little more user-friendly to some people, but if what Steve has works, I just want to make it work and make sure that everybody gets heard.
Right.
So with that, the
No,
only thing we...
can I add one comment into this?
Sure.
It's back to the thing we just passed. It ain't none of my business and I ain't on no deal, but I would like to be informed on the
You mean if
approval
someone comes to develop?
for that development, yes,
You
for
like city
drainage,
engineering, is that what you like?
city engineering, I would, yeah.
I'd be more than willing
Yeah,
to do that if we are submitted, if we
Please
receive
include him
plans.
on an email.
Right, I'll let you know.
Yeah, because I just personally, I mean, with my opinion coming into this was with Hobby Lobby pushing more. I know it's supposed to be all right and everything, but even without this approval, and I push for the approval because it's his right to develop it. It's only, basically, I'm looking at it as 1 or 2 lots, which is not gonna, and he can go across that anyway. So this approval just puts the burden to make sure that the drainage has not been taken care of since you come in last. We've not taken care of that drainage.
Right.
Y'all still flooding. And so-
Outside the 17 acres is what.
Yeah, outside of 17 acres. So hopefully this will put a little bit more oomph.
And trying to get it
If to
done.
get it, when the engineer goes and says, okay, he's gonna build something and go across right here, then there's a problem already, then he's gonna have to surpass that problem to get to this problem. and we see a big rain with Hobby Lobby coming, so hopefully will be more beneficial to the area.
Right.
Rick,
That's my comment.
It seems to me like the city, someone needs to really get involved with this area, because the same issue keeps coming up, and for good reason. You know, maybe a team of engineers, independent, that's not gonna make $1 off any of the property over there. Maybe we've reached the saturation point in terms of housing there, maybe we haven't.
They also have a problem, and I know y'all are aware of it. When you come in to turn in your neighborhood, to come into that lot on the corner, that empty lot, after a hard rain, get you some rubber boots to go stand in, the water will be knee deep there. So just remember, whoever owns that lot, they can build a house there right now and build it up 3 foot to get the water off their property, and they're gonna give you another 2 foot of water down at your end of the street.
Well,
And it's there now.
as Judge Harrington
So-
correctly pointed out, the law says you're bound to receive and discharge water in the same manner that you were in the past. And I don't think that's been respected, but, you know, we've got the mayor-elect here, we've got 4 lawyers in the back, I mean, you know, maybe it's time, maybe it's time.
I'm not trying to get out of either way. I'll take the
Maybe
heat,
it's
I'll
time
take
to-
the heat either way. I mean, allowing him to build on that.
Well,
But I'll also, I'm trying to also help you get rid of your drainage problem.
But Ricky, while we're spitballing it, maybe it's time for the city to come in and expropriate it a couple extra feet in this drainage ditch on either side. If they can't get voluntary conveyances, get expropriation and go clean these ditches out. I mean, this is not rocket science.
If
You
it
just
work,
need-
if that works
you
real
just
good
need-
there, I'm gonna bring them over on mine too, because
Well,
also,
but
we
the
need that in our
problem is
neighborhood.
We've developed stuff over the years and just left the ditches there and left no maintenance servitude in there. I mean, I've been doing title work, abstract and stand-up abstracting since 1981. And I've seen that problem here in Natchitoches, is that if you want a 10-foot ditch, they leave a 10-foot ditch. You don't leave 3 feet on either side to allow somebody to come in and clean it up. Maybe it's time for the city to take the bull by the horns and expropriate a servitude. You don't have to actually take their land, but just enough to get in there with a track hoe or whatever. That's more your bailiwick than mine, but some kind of device to get in there and clean that stuff out every couple of years. But
That's all I had to say.
All right. Any other comments before we move on? Roman number 7, Reverend Claiborne.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Back.
McAllister, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.